Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. In manufacturing, we're going into the same building often and looking to bring that level of energy and positivity that we can be fresh each day. And that sometimes is really hard. We want to stay positive, and sometimes it can be a grind, and there's different ways of viewing positivity. So I need to bring in an expert. So my friend, Dr. Paul, he's the shrink that expands your life. He has a black belt in positivity. We'll find out what that is. And he's a professional psychologist. And in this last half of his career, he's really devoted into creating models and helping us understand that. So thanks so much for coming on today, Dr. Paul.
I am so thrilled to be here. Trevor, this is fun. You and I have talked several times now. And every time we chat, there's productive, good things that happen. So I'm just glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
So I've seen all sides. I've seen people come into work and everything's falling apart and they're positive, and then it's almost like disillusional. And then I see other people come into a plant and it can be running okay, and they're finding out everything's awful. What can you just kind of maybe start at the foundation of, like, for you, you've done so much work on positivity. Like, what is it?
Yeah. And let's just address the elephant in the room, because positivity, you hear it all the time, right? Just think positive. And it's kind of annoying, or it can be, because sometimes it's thrown around as this trite, fluffy, motivational speaker kind of a phrase. I am a professional psychologist, and I have dedicated the last 30 years of my life, my entire career, to identifying what this actually is from a psychological standpoint. And this model that I've developed around positivity gets past all the trite, fluffy, just think positive stuff into the actual psychology and the science behind how to operate the equipment of our own mind. And
all right, so hang on for this ride.
Oh, man. And you know this in manufacturing. How important is it to know how to operate the equipment? Right?
Now you're talking.
Because it can be dangerous. I remember when I was working in a ladder factory, Trevor, we were fabricating aluminum ladders. Maybe you've heard of the brand Little Giant. I worked in the Little Giant ladder factory. This is before I ever became a psychologist. But I remember one day I was in there working with George, one of my coworkers, who accidentally got his thumb into one of the punch presses, and it severed his thumb. Well, this was a problem, right? And I remember loading him into I had a little Ford Escort, and I loaded him in there because I got to be the ambulance. I got to take George to the hospital, and we had to gather up what we could find to see if they could reattach it. I mean, and not to be graphic about that, but the equipment is really, really useful for what it's intended to do. And it's extremely dangerous if you don't know how to operate the equipment properly, or if you ignore the safety guidelines. And you're going to see some parallels there, because the equipment of your own mind is amazing at what it's intended to do. And you can run into trouble real fast. So let's start with this. My job is to illuminate the obvious. Okay, this is really cool. I get paid to tell people things they already know.
All right.
And how cool is that, right? But there are obvious things that are completely unnoticed until they're called to your attention. Like your shirt. Can you feel it? Well, now you can.
You brought awareness to it.
You didn't notice it before I called it to your attention. And that's obvious to you as I call that to your attention. Or the fact that we're speaking English. Did you notice? And that's a weird question because it's obvious, but you didn't really notice it until it was called to your attention. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Because in manufacturing, I've seen that someone will bring that up. It's like, well, yeah, I know that. Well, hold on. It just took me a while to kind of surface that. But let's just pause for a moment and realize that, I got a nice flannel kind of Canadian Minnesota type shirt on today, and it does feel good, but I didn't really think about that until you brought it up.
Right. Or even that you were wearing a shirt, which is obvious, but your brain just tunes all of these details out. Mm-hmm. It's been programmed. See, your brain's job is to keep things really efficient. If you had to notice everything, it would drive you crazy. All right. Notice your shoes. Oh, yeah, I've got shoes on too, don't I? Well, you can feel them all along, but you don't notice it. Mm-hmm. So many of the processes that are going on in our own brain, in our own mind, are in that space. They're obvious. You see them immediately when I call them to your attention, but they're unnoticed up until that point. So that's my job. And I've figured out some of the processes that are going on. Let me introduce you to another one real quick. It's called metacognition. Okay, now that's a fancy psychological term. We like to make up words in psychology. It makes us feel smart. And this is one of them. But if you break it down, cognition simply means thinking. Metacognition is a higher level. It's thinking about thinking. Now, do you notice in this moment that you can do this now?
Yeah. You brought my attention to it.
I've brought your attention to it. This is huge, Trevor, because metacognition creates a little space. In that space is where choice exists. Now, that's important enough to repeat. Metacognition creates a space. In that space is where choice exists. And until you see it as a choice, it's not. Meaning your brain is going to roll with whatever it's programmed to do. Until you become aware of what you're thinking, you think about your thinking, and then that puts you back into a position of choice. So here's a good place to start. It is what it is.
Oh, I remember that saying.
Yeah, you've heard it. Everybody's heard it. And it can be kind of annoying depending on who's saying it and why.
Yeah.
But all it means for today is the way things are. Okay, it's who you are. It's who you're with. It's what you have. It's where you work. It's the way things are without changing anything. It is what it is. Okay, that's where we're going to start. You were asking me about this just before the podcast. In fact, you texted me last night about this. You know that a couple of months ago, I'm sitting there minding my own business. Mm-hmm. And I get a call from my son, my oldest son. I've got 3 sons and a daughter. And I get a call from my son. Dad, I have cancer. Okay, now some of you, as you're driving to work today, have got that call before. Yeah, if you're a parent, you can imagine what that felt. Can you imagine how that felt? And I know you can, Trevor, because I'm watching you as we're having this interview and you're responding to that.
Feeling that.
You feel something. Okay, now I share that with you because I want to use this to demonstrate what I'm talking about here. It is what it is. And what it is my son has cancer. Now, what is our brain doing with that? What is your brain doing with it as I share it with you? It's a process that I call evaluation. Now, I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a minute. I'm going to leave you hanging for just a sec. Okay. But evaluation means judgment. And in this moment, I invite you to notice, just like you noticed your shirt earlier. Oh, look how quickly your brain forgot about that. Notice that you are constantly judging, aren't you?
We talk a lot about judging in manufacturing, the default.
Oh, you're judging yourself pretty harshly sometimes. You judge your coworkers. You judge the shop foreman. You judge your spouse. You judge the economy. You judge the government. You judge the weather. You're judging me. It's cool. I'm judging you.
Yeah, exactly.
So just notice that you're doing it. And that's not bad. That's what humans do. Look, our brain has 2 main jobs: to keep us safe and to prove us right. And both of those get in our way all the time. But to keep you safe, your brain has to judge. It has to evaluate. It has to ask questions like, is this good? Is this bad? Is this safe? Is this dangerous? You're constantly judging. Am I within the standards? Am I outside of the tolerances? You're constantly judging.
Yeah.
It's okay. Welcome to Earth. That's what brains do. All right.
Dr. Paul, we talk a lot about just the fact of it's okay to think that. You just don't need to say it because you can't control sometimes what you think, but you have a lot more choices in what you say.
Well, interesting. We're going to tie right back into that.
All right.
Because, so notice that your brain is constantly judging. So I share with you that my son has cancer. What I didn't tell you yet, that I'm sharing with you now, is that this cancer, although it is aggressive and serious, has not spread or metastasized to other organs or systems in his body. Okay, notice what your reaction to that was.
I just felt my body kind of release a little bit there, and the fact of, okay, that's...
Yes.
Yeah.
I felt my body do the same thing when he shared that additional information with me. Okay, so check it out. It is what it is. And what it is my son has cancer. What am I doing with it? I'm judging it. I'm evaluating it. My brain is saying, is this good? Is this bad? I don't know. I'll check. Except we don't hear that part. All we hear is, oh, that's bad. Look, the word evaluation implies comparison with some standard, right? Like in manufacturing, you run into this all the time. There is some standard that you're comparing all of the product to. And if it doesn't meet that standard, you deem it to be inadequate.
Yeah, we do our first offs, we do our checks, and
we do it all the time. Yeah. Okay, so your brain is doing this with every experience that you have. You have some standard. So when we take cancer, now check this out. What it is could always be better. Is that true?
Could always be better. We are in that mindset of struggling sometimes to be mindful and be grateful for the present moment instead of just kind of thinking, well, I'd want it to be this way.
You can always imagine something better.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Absolutely.
No matter how good it is, it could always be. Check your bank account. Yeah. You're in the top 10% of the world's wealthy when we take the entire population of the planet. Okay. But you know that your bank account could be better, right? How about your relationships? How about your health? Anything, you pick it, your business, whatever. Okay. So when we take what it is, cancer, and we compare it to the standard of something better, like not cancer. That's
better.
That arguably, that would be better, right? Yes. So when I compare my son has cancer to my son doesn't have cancer, how do I feel about my son has cancer? It sucks. And Trevor, you're always right about how you feel.
Yes.
How you feel is 100% consistent with the way your brain is doing this. So it really does suck compared to not having cancer. But then I gave you a little more information. It has not metastasized or spread to other areas or systems or organs in his body. Your visible response to that, Trevor, and whoever's listening to this, maybe you're driving along and you're like, oh, okay. Right? You feel this little bump of relief. Why? Yes. Because I just gave you another standard. When I take my son has cancer and I compare it to something worse, like my son has a cancer that has spread or is metastasized or is terminal, well, I'll take this.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you feel about what it is when you compare it to something worse? You feel better about what it is. Now, notice we didn't take away the cancer. What we did is we compared it to something else. And in the comparison, it looks better. That causes us to actually feel relief, gratitude, peace. Now, I invite you to notice that. I've developed a visual model for this, Trevor. You've seen it.
I've seen it. I got the card.
Where what it is right in the middle of a line here. And I know, audio podcast. You guys are like, show me. I will. I will show you, okay? When you get where you're going, or if you can pull off safely and do this, I'm going to give you a visual model that you can refer back to. Just go to drpauljenkins.com, spelled with a DR. And Trevor, you'll put the link in the notes, right?
Yes, sir.
drpauljenkins.com/MM, which stands for?
Mindfulness Manufacturing.
Absolutely. Right, just remember the MM and my name, drpauljenkins.com/MM. I'll put the visual model in your hands, because then you're going to see what I'm referring to here. The model helps us to remember that it is what it is. It could always be better. It could always be worse. When we compare what it is to something better, we feel worse about what it is. Pretty simple. Mm-hmm. When we take what it is and we compare it to something worse, we'll take this. We feel better.
I got to ask, because I think some listeners might be thinking the same thing, is that this sounds like this model is something that you really need to work on your own. Like, this isn't like, oh, I'm going to apply this model to my spouse or someone else. Like, because I'm feeling like that, or my employees, because I'm feeling like this is something that we got to look at ourselves first. Because I hear sometimes the comments, well, it could be worse. You know, you could have no food, right? Instead of like the food you don't want. And it seems like when it comes from someone else, it doesn't seem to work as well. But when we actually just like feel it ourselves, and this is why I want the listeners to be clear of, this is not to go into work and start applying this to everyone else. I want to clarify, this is something that you got to do yourself.
Do you remember the story about George in the ladder factory?
Yes.
Okay. The proper operation of the equipment. Here's the number one safety guideline for this model. It is for personal use only.
All right, good. I needed to hear you say that. It seemed
Trevor,
obvious,
you just pointed that out. Look, if you try to use this on your spouse, I'll come and drive ambulance for you. Okay. You're going to cause some problems. Now, can you teach this? Can you share this with other people? Yeah, that's my whole business. That's what I get paid to do. But your point is so well taken, that this is for the operation of the equipment of your own mind. Now, are other people's minds doing this? Yes. Mm-hmm. And there's a process. I have a whole process where I certify positivity practitioners. Okay, so I train people how to do this safely.
Safely. I love it.
I don't want this to cause problems. Look, if I tell you, look, my son has cancer, and your comeback is, well, it could be worse. I'm like, shut up and get out of my face.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. But for me, you mentioned in my introduction, I'm a black belt in positivity. I practice what I preach, and I preach what I practice. And when my son called me, I heard my brain do this, Trevor. I heard this in my brain. Oh, I'm so glad that it wasn't his wife calling me to tell me he had been killed in a head-on collision. Because compared to that, I'll take this. I got a flight to Chicago not to attend a funeral, but to support his first round of chemotherapy. I've spent more quality time with my oldest son in the last month than I have in the last decade.
You get to spend that time with him.
There are upsides to everything. But if we go to our default, our programming, and we say this is bad, then our brain's second job kicks in, and it works on proving us right. It's your circumstances are neutral. And when I say circumstances are neutral, I don't mean that they're painless or easy, because sometimes it's very painful and difficult. But what I mean is it could always be better. Mm-hmm. It could always be worse. Now you choose a standard by which you're going to do that evaluation. You can't turn it off. So you have to choose which direction. If you don't choose, you get default.
And I love the fact, Dr. Paul, and it's all about you and your choices. And you can't tell someone else how they feel, and how you feel. No one can really tell you to feel different. I can't say, well, just Dr. Paul, just be more positive.
Hey, just cheer up.
Yeah. Like, you just got to look at the bright side. Well,
that's why I hate it when people throw around, oh, just be positive.
Yeah.
They don't even know what it means. You, as you're listening to this podcast today, you know more about what positivity means than most of the population. Mm-hmm. And I've only shared with you one of the processes.
Oh yeah, I told you I love to research. One of the privileges of having you on the podcast, Dr. Paul, is just to understand your work better, understand you as just as a person, and it's been a fun couple of weeks just preparing for this moment. And I think there's about 5 or 6 episodes that I'm like, okay, so I can talk about this and this, and the feedback from listeners is give me a thread, right? Give me something that I can walk away with. And is there a like some falseness that you can fall into with this too? Because I've seen this where a production manager will walk in and all the presses are down and like he's shutting everybody down, and it just walks in and just says, hey, if the sun's shining, everything's going to be okay. And it's like, but it's not okay. And I need you to show that you understand it's impacting all of us and that you care. So being like super positive doesn't impact me well. How do we deal with that?
You're alluding to something that is called toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is ignoring the pain, the difficulty. It's like pasting on a smile and pretending that everything's peachy.
Mm-hmm.
That is not true positivity. Positivity includes pain. That's weird. What? Positivity includes pain. It's not denying the pain. You'll notice that my chosen evaluation of my son's diagnosis is that it could always be better. It could always be worse. I choose to see this as good. And I'm not saying cancer is good. I'm saying what it is good. And it is compared to something worse, because that changes my energy. And my energy moving forward is important because we're not done. We're going to go from evaluation mode into the next one, creation. And Trevor, this is creation of what is to be. And that doesn't exist yet. We haven't created it yet. So what if I gave you a challenge? What if everybody, as you're listening to this podcast, what if we just took 15 minutes? I'll time you. That's all you get, 15 minutes. To go out there, use your creative energy, use your brilliant mind to somehow, in 15 minutes, make your life worse. Wait, please don't do this.
Yeah.
I give this assignment sometimes in a keynote or a training, and people are like, okay. No. Would you ever do that?
No.
On purpose, I mean? We do it accidentally all the time. But would you ever intentionally go make your life worse? No. Because if I give you a choice, what do you want? Do you want something better or something worse? Or do you want to think about it for a minute? You want something better, but look how quickly your brain came up with half a dozen ways to pull that off. And it wouldn't even take 15 minutes.
The more you talk, Dr. Paul, I'm just kind of like, I got to ask him this. It's kind of like, so one of the things that, we talk a lot about is that anxiety of we're not really seeing what it is. And it's like what it could be. And my son and I have some conversations, and sometimes I don't know how to support him as a father when he's expressing, well, what if this happens? And what if it kind of goes this way? And sometimes, you don't want to be a coach. You want to be a friend to your son, right? You just want to be someone else that can help through that. How do you balance that between, I want to envision this because I want to appreciate what it is versus I'm going to spiral into a place that's just not helpful?
You are brilliantly setting up what this creation mode is all about.
All right.
Because look, creation has to do with what is to be. That doesn't exist yet. So the only place it really exists right now is in our imagination of it. Now, I invite you, turn on your metacognition again. Think about your thinking. Do you know what's coming? Like if I ask you, how are you doing next week?
Don't know.
You don't know.
No.
And some people are like, I'm doing great next week. You don't know. You've got something to do with it. Don't forget that. Okay. But you don't know. So all you can do is imagine. Now focus on the feelings, because you said a word a minute ago that we're coming back to. Focus on the feelings. When I imagine, because I don't know, or predict or expect that what's coming is even worse than what I've already got, how do I feel? This is anxiety. That's the word you brought up earlier.
Yeah.
That's 30 years of clinical experience in a nutshell. All right. Anxiety is when we imagine that there are worse things coming. And it's usually embodied in that what if question.
Yes.
That your son came up with.
Yeah.
And it's not the question, it's the answer. That's the problem. Because we're predicting, that would be bad. That would be worse than what.
Yeah.
You don't know.
You don't know.
Focusing on the feelings. What happens when you expect or anticipate or predict that what's coming is even better than what we've already got? How do you feel?
Feel good, but then the other, and this is what I practice, and I like envisioning good outcomes. And
absolutely,
I find that for myself, there's a better chance of that happening. And then, when I would maybe have a conversation with someone else, it might be, well, I don't want to envision anything. I don't want my evaluation to to be too creative, because what if that doesn't happen? I'll be let down.
You know what? Here's the truth. Everything, you look around you, everything that has been created was first funk. Wait, can I say it that way?
You could say whatever you want. You're Dr. Paul.
It was first imagined. It was thought up. It was created first mentally, psychologically, spiritually, before it was ever created in the physical world. This is why architects get paid more than guys who swing hammers, because the creation happens in that imagination world. What we imagine coming, you just said this in different words. What we imagine is the template, the blueprint, the instructions for our brain to go move the elements around to match that picture. And it never matches perfectly. My son is a mechanical engineer. He's got a PhD in mechanical engineering from Purdue. The kid's a brainiac kid. He's the same son that has cancer, but he's brilliant. And he taught me this concept years ago. Tolerances, right? You have to get your manufacturing within certain parameters or standards or tolerances. As long as it's within that, we're good. Well, why not just make it exact? Because you can't.
Yeah.
It's always off, at least a little. This bothers some people because they're like, well, no, it needs to be exact. Yeah, within certain tolerances, right?
It depends on what you're making.
So
manufacturing is your tolerance level.
Exactly. Yes. And you can't get it exact because at some point, you're splitting atoms.
Yeah.
I mean, how many atoms is it off? I don't know. But that precision, see, we get lulled into thinking sometimes that things should be perfect, when our life experience will tell us it never is. So what if that thing that I'm imagining to create isn't perfect? And I'm here to tell you, brace yourself, it won't be. And that's not bad. I do whole trainings on creation. And you've listened to a couple of episodes of my podcast.
Lots of episodes are fantastic.
But so you look at what we've covered here. There are two processes that are going on in your mind: evaluation and creation. And it's kind of like a traditional carpenter's hammer. All right. You know how a hammer has two ends on the head? It's got a blunt face for the purpose of driving nails, and it's got a claw on the other end for the purpose of pulling them out. You don't use a claw to pound a nail, and you can't use the face to pull one out. It's not designed that way. In the same way, your imagination, you can always imagine two ends, okay? Something better and something worse. Imagining something worse is not for the purpose of creation. It's for the purpose of evaluation, to see that you're already in a pretty good place compared to that. And imagining something better is not for the purpose of beating ourselves up because we're not there yet. That's a misuse. It's using the wrong end of the tool for the wrong job. When you're in evaluation, imagine something worse so that you can see you're in a good place. But then when you go to creation mode, turn the hammer around and use the other end of it.
Yeah. Here's what I'll pull in to wrap this up with our listeners here, is that when you're going in, when say we're running production today, and I think we come in and all of a sudden we got call-ins, we're short on people. What it is what it is. I got a whole new perspective on that saying, because I got beat up for saying that before, but now I've got Dr. Paul to help me how we use it in the right way. Yeah. And it's like, okay, I'm evaluating it. We are short on people. There's some material shortages possibly. And but really my idea, how I'm going to use my creation and how I'm going to visualize that is that, we could still hit target today, and what's wrong with thinking, this is, I think, in leadership and being mindful in manufacturing, it's kind of like, that's our responsibility, is to help with that creation of like, we could hit this target, right? This could be done. And then manufacturing, Dr. Paul, that's really what I see, is that sometimes we just need somebody who can create that positive vision of like, and you know what? I see it in you. You guys can do this today. We can do this. And
absolutely.
This is what it looks like. And man, I cannot believe how fast our conversation goes. But Dr. Paul, this has just been, this is a lot. It's simple, and it's also a lot to take in the fact of like how I love how you explained and how we use it. I love how it tied into to manufacturing. And so
Oh,
as
yeah.
people are walking into the plant, they're going to be just hanging up on this podcast. What do you want to leave them with when they think of Dr. Paul?
I think the main thing is to keep that metacognition turned on. Think about your thinking. You're not wrong for thinking something that you're thinking, but it does affect your energy. And it's kind of like what you were saying. Let's say that you get to the factory today and some people have called in and we're shorthanded and it is what it is. And instead of having that be a resigned, oh, well, we can't do anything about this, just say, ask a different question. Instead of, I can't because, what if you were to ask, how can I? This is where efficiency is born. We get used to doing things a certain way. Well, what if we have to do it with half the people in half the time? Well, we're going to have to figure out a different way to do it. And that is a creation process. And it starts with realizing, okay, we can work with this. It's just like my son's cancer. Okay, we can work with this. Instead of insisting that what it is be different, let's come to peace with what it is and then move forward and create an upgrade.
I love it. Our listeners, we're going to have that link in the show notes in how you can download that model. And I think even if you listen to this again, if you could at your desk and kind of like look at the model as Dr. Paul goes through it, it is so helpful. Live on Purpose Radio. Who's driving your life? Man, I just went through a bunch of different episodes and just personally, just resonated with. I picked out some different episodes in there, and he's got hundreds of episodes on there, which is fantastic. An amazing YouTube channel, so many different ways to learn. And we'll leave that in the show notes. Anything else that for our listeners to follow and learn from you, Dr. Paul?
Thank you. Go get the model. Okay. That's the best place to start, because once you learn how to operate the equipment of your own mind, it changes everything that your mind touches. That's the best thing that I can leave you with. Go grab the model. And if you have questions about it, I'm around. I'm happy to help you with it. We've got coaching programs and other things available, but start with that model and that will change the game for you.
And if you work in manufacturing, this is going to connect with you. That whole operating model. I just love that. And I learn every time. I learn today. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us on our show today, Dr. Paul.
You're welcome. And thank you for the invitation. Time to live on purpose, everybody.
Hey folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.